Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Amma ba'd, ahabati fillah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As'alullah kareem Rabb al-Arsh al-Azim an yatawallana fi dunya wal-akhirah. Allahumma inni أعوذ بك أن أشرك بك وأنا أعلم واستغفرك لمن أعلم. Ahabati fillah, continue on in our reading of advice to the youth of Ahl Sunnah. We reached the 7th point, and that is, the Shaykh goes on to say, he says, rebuke and refutation of the one in opposition is to be considered advice for and preservation of the ummah from falling into his mistake. This is from the well-known established principles of Ahl Sunnah and considered to be one of the greatest forms of jihad. But it is imperative to carefully consider the guidelines and conditions by which one can achieve his goal and from amongst them. So here the Shaykh is introduced again, or emphasized the mas'ala of hajr, of boycotting, and that it is a means, it's actually from the prophetic advice, ad-din nasiha, where the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam said, ad-din nasiha, said the religion is sincere advice. And so this is from sincere advice. Boycotting is from that bab. Boycotting is from that. In that there are times, in order to advise as a form of advice, boycotting is a form of advice. It's a form of advice for the Amatul Muslimin, for the general Muslim folk, and it is a means of protecting the deen. And that's why the Shaykh referred to it as jihad. And as he said in the first sentence, he says, rebuke and refutation of the one in opposition, meaning the mukhalif, is to be considered advice for and preservation of the ummah from falling into its mistake. So the reason that refutations take place, one of the Sharia objectives is that it is advice, and it's in order to prevent others from falling into that mistake and repeating that mistake or taking that as deen. He says first that the individual has sincerity to Allah, ikhlas, and sincerity in his intention to aid the truth, and absolutely restrict himself to this. From the prerequisites of ikhlas, or requisites, first, that you desire guidance for the one in opposition and for him to return to the haqq. So the Shaykh is saying here that we actually have to have sincerity in this, because this is a mas'ala deeniyah. This has to do with our deen. And that we should want good for the person that we're refuting. Okay, it shouldn't be just out of hatred and malice. And this is what a lot of people look at refutations as it's a type of battle. And a lot of times it is laced with cursing and swearing at people, belittling them, giving them titles which belittle them in their honor and all kind of things, and personal things. But that's not the maqsad shari. That's not the Sharia maqsad. The Sharia intent is that you are trying to actually invite that person back to the truth, or at least alienate their mukhalif, their bid'ah, and so forth. But there should be ikhlas lillah, that you're doing it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you're doing it to protect and aid his deen. So you should desire good for the person when you're making refutations. Instead, it shouldn't be just a fighting, a back and forth. The second thing he mentions, he says that you take every path possible by which it is anticipated that his heart will draw closer to the truth without chasing him away. So this is also very important, that you shouldn't be chasing the people away. that you should be, again, this is an invitation for someone to correct their aqidah, to correct their minhaj, their methodology, to correct themselves regarding to a particular mas'ala, okay, in the deen. Third, coupled with these two, you supplicate to Allah sincerely for his guidance, especially if he is from Ahl Sunnah, or part of the general body of Muslims. For indeed, the Prophet ﷺ used to supplicate for the guidance of the kuffar. So how much more should it be emphasized with the muwahid from the Muslims? So this is very important as well. The Sheikh, what he said, emphasizing that you should be sincere about a person's guidance, that you want guidance for someone, and that why is this the case? Because even the Messenger ﷺ used to pray and supplicate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, asking him to guide people who disbelieved in Allah, people who were pagans. So how much more so should we be concerned about the guidance of someone who's a person of Islam, they're a Muslim? The second point here, he says the refutation should be issued by a scholar whose foot is firmly embedded in the field of knowledge, in that he knows in detail all the dynamics of the issue at hand, which requires refutation. This is by knowing the legislated and textual evidences and the rulings of the ulama in relation to the infraction and opposition. He knows the extent of the misconception. He knows the extent of the misconception, and that the individual may hold which initiated this infraction, the refutations of the ulama concerning it, and how to benefit from them in the realm of refutation. So again, it should be somebody of ilm. It should be somebody of knowledge who knows about these concepts, about dealing with refutations. They should be grounded in knowledge. They should know about the mukhalif as well. They should know about the mukhalif, the whatever infractions that's taking place, and that they should know how to remove that doubt through refutation. So it should be ahl al-ilm. It shouldn't be everyone. Everyone should not be getting on the microphone and making a video, or grabbing a pen and writing an article or something and involving themselves in this. Again, this is for the people of knowledge. He says, likewise, it is appropriate that the one in opposition be refuted with weighty evidences. This is very important, because sometimes you see this in people's rudud, in their reputations, that it's weak in evidence, or the istinbat, how it's used, how the dalil is used as evidence is weak. So you'll see this a lot. So the Sheikh is bringing up something so important that we need to be aware of when reading refutations even. How is this evidence? Is this evidence substantial, showing that this person has fallen to error or fallen to bid'ah, or what have you? You need evidence. Lazim, labud ad-dalil. Labud ad-dalil. So again, he says, likewise, it is appropriate that the one in opposition be refuted with weighty evidences in order to establish the haqq and remove the misconceptions. Very important. This is done by using expressions which are clear and precise, in order that the intent of the one refuting does not become misconstrued or misunderstood, or to leave room for the one in opposition to feel as though it was not convincing enough, or that he may misunderstand the objective. If this is not done, then it will result in tremendous harm, like confrontation and resistance toward the one who deprived himself of these conditions before embarking upon the refutation initially. Very important. So the Sheikh is just saying that in refutations, they should be done with knowledge, and they should have weighty evidences, meaning strong dalil, not that which is weak and that which is muhtamal and just coming up with opinions and why didn't you, the Sheikh said this. No, it should be strong evidences in your refutations based on the book and the Sunnah and the aqwal of the of Ahl Sunnah. It should be weighty. It shouldn't be weak, and it shouldn't be muhtamal. It shouldn't be, well, yeah, there's a point there, but then the point is this. It shouldn't be something which is ambiguous as far as evidence. You want to be strong in the presentation of evidence in order to bring that mukhalif, the person who's made the mistake or error, back to the sunnah. And also, by doing so, it leaves less room for them to resist. If it is very strong from the Quran and the Sunnah, then they can't say, well, that was weak. I'm going to refute them back, or I'm going to get involved, and it goes back to a back and forth. And we see this a lot. You see it even with scholars. You see some of this back and forth, unfortunately. But if you come with hujjah wal bayan, very strong, then you've achieved the objective, and you are, you've achieved the objective. Now, he goes on to say the third point regarding this hajr. One should carefully consider while refuting the one in opposition that they vary in their levels of opposition, in their levels in the religion, and in their worldly status. The motive for opposition initially differs from one individual to the next. It could be the result of ignorance, jahl, hawa, following his desires, or just absolute innovation, or due to the fact that he is inarticulate and doesn't know how to express himself, or just a mere slip of the tongue. It could also be the case that he is affected by his sheikh, or the environment in which he was raised, the way he interpreted his intent, or other than this, from the many reasons which lead to legislative infractions or opposition to the Kitab and Sunnah and the methodology of the Salaf. Whoever neglects taking these things into consideration and acknowledge their variations and differences when refuting, then perhaps he may fall into either excessiveness and transgression of the boundaries or total negligence. Either one extreme. A person can fall into either extreme, either having ghulu, being they're very extreme, they're going beyond the bounds and the principles. They're making hajr of everyone. Oh, you cough, hajr. Oh, you're drinking coffee, mubtadi'ah. And they're giving names, and the new sect, the coffee drinkers, Ahl coffee. This is the extremism that you see that results from people going to an extreme. And what does that mean? Tajawuz al-had means they go beyond the bounds. Then there's the other extreme, if you will. It's mumayya, meaning that they belittle the principles and they begin to become negligent in the principles of Ahl Sunnah, in the madhab of the Salaf. And both of those are two extremes that we want to avoid. And then he says, so they go to these extremes, he says, which would prevent the one being boycotted from taking full advantage of his admonition and diminish the benefits found therein. So here the sheikh is talking about that the person who is giving the advice, the person who's making the refutation, can sometimes fall into this extreme, that they're being extreme, or they're being, as you say, mumayya, or they're belittling the principles of Ahl Sunnah. And this has the result obviously is worse than the alleged treatment often. Wallahu musta'an. And there were many fawaid there, and maybe sometime we will actually go into depth in this treatise and give it its proper haqq, because there was a lot of fawaid here, but I'm in hopes that today I will finish this treatise before I end up traveling, inshallah ta'ala. So let's move on to the next principle. He says the fourth, that one carefully considers while refuting the one in opposition, achieving the legislative objectives and benefits of refutation. For neglecting this results in greater harm towards the one being refuted, and at that point, refutation is not admissible nor recommended. For in Islam, you don't combat harm with that which is greater than it. As Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah says, and again, we've talked about this a lot. We wanted, that you want to take the less of the two evils, akhaf dararain. If you have two evils, you want to take the less. And you also want to look at the masalih wal mafasid. You want to look at the harms and the benefits. Is there a greater harm by making this refutation than there's a benefit? Or vice versa? Is it much more benefit to speak about this issue rather than keep silent, and maybe the harm spreads more? So all of these things, you have to weigh these objectives. So Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, in light of this, he said, it is not permissible to repel a minor evil with one that is greater than it, nor to repel the lesser of the two evils by embarking upon the greater of the two. For indeed the legislation of Islam came to secure and perfect these benefits for the Ummah, along with repelling and lessening the evil as much as possible. So what is recommended is to give precedence to the best of the two goods, if it is not possible to achieve both of them, and to repel the worst of the two evils, if it is not possible to rid ourselves of them all together. So again, we're always looking at what's aslah, what's more, brings about more rectification. Now, he goes on to mention the fifth. He went into depth kind of on this. We'll try to be quick. He says, what should also be emphasized is that the refutation should be commensurate with the degree of propagation and prevalence of this particular infraction. Okay, that sounds abstract. What does that mean? It means that when you make a refutation, that it should be in relation to the degree that this bid'ah is spread. And I'm going to give you an example. This, I believe, was a great fitna for us before, the fact that Salafi publications, because they were the big translators back, in the early days of the Dawah being in the West, especially in the UK and America and other places, that one of the things, some of the things that they were doing, they were translating and stuff from ulama and bringing it out, which didn't have an effect on the Western audiences. So in fact, they were almost spreading other bid'ah, because the people didn't know who Abu Hassan Ma'rabi was. They didn't know about the principles of Ma'rabiyya. They didn't know about any of this thing. And you introduce those things. But the people had other things. The people are trying to keep their children Muslim. The people are trying to keep their kids out of gangs. The people are trying to keep themselves out of the porno shop. The people are trying to keep themselves from getting killed. The people in the West have a whole series of different issues and support as far as establishing Islam in the West, compared to what's going on in Saudi Arabia or what's going on in Yemen. And so when you bring that fitna, or you bring that bid'ah, sometimes bid'ah, meaning you've introduced those ideas. The people didn't know what the Qaida Ma'rabiyya was. And I'm not saying that those principles shouldn't be warned against, but they should be warned against for those people who can process that, who it's relevant for. I wouldn't bring that to, I wouldn't have a class for new Muslims. And I'm saying, now today, we're going to talk about this man, a sheikh. His name is Yahya al-Hujuri, and he made these mistakes. And his sheikh was Sheikh Muqbil. And these people need to know about Tawheed. They need to know how to wash themselves. They need to know how to pray. So you've got to, this is not the way of the Rabbaniyun. It's not the way of the people of knowledge and ilm wa fiqh wa sunnah, who raise the people up in levels. La ilaha illallah. And so so the sheikh is mentioning here that it needs to be relevant for the people, and that you are not, if this bid'ah is not widespread, you don't need to spread it. The people don't know. They don't deal with that issue. It should be relevant for the people, so the people can process, so they can practice their Islam, and they can stay away from mukhalafat. But entering every mukhalafat, for example, you're going to the awam and you're talking about the sa'afika and all this kind of stuff. What in the world are you thinking? How is this going to benefit the Muslims? What do the people know about this discord that has happened and caused major splitting between ulama known for the sunnah? Propagating the sunnah comes sanawat. And they split, and they split into whole parties over this issue. Some will justify it, say, yeah, this was the right thing to do, because, and then others will say, no, come on, man. Either way, regardless of what you think about that fitna, was that something that needs to be in the Western audience and for the general Muslims? Do the general Muslims need to be involved in these kind of things? No, they need to know the principles of the deen, and they need to know things that are relevant for them, and not introduce new fitna for them in their communities. So this is what the sheikh is making ishara to. He said, if it has spread in a particular land or community, okay, this infraction, for it is not, here's what he's saying, for it is not recommended to hasten with refutation by way of compilation or by cassette tapes or by any means of circulation of information, especially in a land that has not heard of this misconception or infraction. Okay, did I hit it right on? Yes, this is exactly what the Sheikh's talking about. For in this case, spreading the refutation is in a manner which is indirect, and it is possible that the people could come across this refutation, and the misconception thereof remains in their hearts, and they are not convinced. So leaving the people intact and free from hearing this batil to begin with is better than bringing it to their attention and then trying to refute it afterwards. The Salaf used to consider this point carefully in their refutations, for in many of their books, which are specific to refutation, they use the haqq to refute falsehood without even mentioning the misconception originally, which is from their fiqh, whereas some of those who came after them have become very negligent in this. So the Salaf, he's saying, even though the Salaf, they wrote many books and things and refuted, they use the haqq to refuse batil. They use the truth. They use dalil, qawi evidence from the book and the sunnah to refute the falsehood, and sometimes without even mentioning the doubt originally. Why? Because maybe the reader wouldn't be convinced by the evidence or could be weak, and they might be inclined towards that batil. And this is why you see I also Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, that they disliked debating and arguing for this very reason, so that way perhaps the person of bid'ah, not that they would have stronger evidence, but they might have more charisma. They might be a better speaker. They might be better in finessing the audience. And so then this, even if the Sahib al-Haq is giving you the truth, this could then allow for the people to hear both sides and begin to choose. Well, hey, I kind of like what the person of bid'ah and zandaka wa ilhad is saying. I think I kind of like that. You know, maybe I don't need to listen to the Sunni like that. Okay, so this is the thing, that bid'ah and the disbelief and shubahat, it can become widespread because of that. Wallahu musta'an. He goes on to say, just as it is said about spreading the reputation in a land which infraction has not become propagated, then the same is said about not spreading it amongst a people who are unfamiliar with the infraction or mistake, even if it is in the same locality in which the mistake was made initially. In short, it is not appropriate to propagate the refutation by way of books or cassette tapes amongst the laypersons who are oblivious to this mistake. How many of the laypersons have been tested with hearing this, and as a result they begin to have doubts and suspicions about the fundamentals of the religion due to the fact that they read what was above their comprehension from the countless books of refutation, which none can enumerate except Allah. So it is incumbent upon those who hasten to spread these books amongst the laypersons to fear Allah and be cautious about being a cause of fitna for the people in the religion of Allah. Allahu Akbar. The Sheikh just really laid it down, and I hope that someone will hear this message and benefit from this message. What a fantastic book, and it's very important for us to know and understand, and it can help navigate this fitna, all the fitnas that we deal with. He said, the most amazing thing I've heard in relation to this is what some of the students have resorted to in spreading these books of refutation amongst those who are new Muslims, new to the religion of Islam, those who have only been Muslim for a few days or a few months. The students encourage them to read these books of refutation. By Allah, what they're doing is amazing. It's a beautiful a statement of the Sheikh. He's really lambasting those who have taken this path of, spreading harm, in fact, in the community. Sixth, refutation of the one who made a mistake is fard al-kifaya. So if some of the ulama shoulder the responsibility of cautioning the ummah and refutation by which the legislative objectives are achieved, then the rest of the scholars are relieved of this obligation and free of blame. This is based upon the established principles that the ulama are unanimously in agreement concerning, along with the other communal obligations. From the most repugnant and hideous mistakes which occur is that when a scholar refutes one who has made a mistake, or when a fatwa is issued by him warning against this individual or against a particular mistake, is that a lot of students who ascribe themselves to following the sunnah and the ulama request from others to make a bayan, a clarification of their position concerning this refutation or fatwa. Rather, the affair has reached the point that they even require from the younger students of knowledge, rather even from the laypersons, to state and clarify their position in relation to this refutation and concerning the one being refuted. They then conclude in light of this their positions of al-wala wal-bara. We've talked about this countless times, and what a problem and a fitna this is for our communities. He said, then they boycott one another based upon this. Rather, some of the students may even boycott and abandon some of their sheikhs, whom they've benefited from for many years in the field of sound aqidah, due to this fitna. This fitna has even made its way to the households to the point that a man would even boycott his own brother, and a son would be disrespectful, rude, and shun his own parents, and perhaps a man may even divorce his wife and separate himself from his own children due to this fitna. So this is things that the sheikh is mentioning that's not even exaggerated, unfortunately. Especially we dealt with these kind of crazy things in the West, but it happens all over the place. It happens all over the world, that this fitna and the way that people deal with the fitna and don't know how to deal with the fitna, and it becomes a great harm and a mushkila for the people. When you look at the community, you will find them divided into two or more groups, every group making accusations against the other and obligating hajr on the other, and all of the above is found with those who ascribe to following the Sunnah. Those who, before the emergence of this differing, could not find anything derogatory to say about the other in relation to their aqidah, nor in the soundness of their minhaj. This is either the result of extreme ignorance of the Sunnah and the principles that were established by Ahl Sunnah in the realm of reprimand, or due to hawa, and we ask Allah for safety and preservation. Thus we'll end that section, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the Almighty to accept our good and forgive our evil. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.